Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis on FM News 101 KXL. Business as usual in the apocalypse. Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis.
Tonight on the show, we're very happy to have Stewart Swerdlow. He's been on the program before. The last time he was on the show was a remarkable program, and we're bringing him back because of tonight's topic. But first of all, I know that we're continually growing in audience, and I'd like to bring Stewart on. Stewart, hi. Welcome back to Ground Zero.
Hi, Clyde. It's good to be back. Thank you.
I would like for you to kind of give a background, your background to people who are new to the show, and let them know who you are and why you're so important.
Well, I don't know about how
you're important in my eyes. That's important. That's important.
Thank you, Clyde. Well, it's a very long story. Goes way back to my very great uncle, Yakov Sverdlov, who was the first president of the Soviet Union. My grandmother was a Soviet spy, and my grandfather was sent to the United States in order to help start the Communist Party, both here and in Great Britain. And because of that, my family was under monitoring by the U.S. government, of course, for loyalty reasons, especially during the Cold War and afterwards. And I, as a child, was taken into the Montauk Project from 1970 to 1983, where we worked on all kinds of mind control experiments, genetic manipulation, time travel, all kinds of electromagnetic experimentations, as you mentioned earlier, about your Halloween show coming up.
Exactly.
So, yes.
So let me ask you about the electronic stuff that you did. Mm-hmm. Is it true that with the right kind of electromagnetic energy, you can open up portals, or you can at least create variables to allow things to pass through? I mean, what did they do at Montauk?
Well, at Montauk, they did use a Delta T antenna, and they did charge it electromagnetically. And in the early days, it was kind of open-ended. They didn't know where the vortex or wormhole would end up. It was unstable. But ultimately, after many years of testing and experimenting, they were able to determine certain endpoints and anchor them, so they knew what point A would lead to point B or C. And so, yes, you can open up a vortex, and you got to be very careful about that, because if you're not knowing where the other end is, it could be literally opening up Pandora's box.
Well, we're actually only using 40,000 volts, so I don't think that's going to be too bad. I wanted to start small.
Well, I have a few people to throw into that voltage if you need some.
Well, I was thinking 40,000 would be good. I think that's what we're going to, either 20 or 40. I'm not sure. I got to find out how high the generators are going to be. It'll cause a static charge, which will create an ozone and an electromagnetic cloud, where we're hoping, we don't know if it'll create a vortex, but what it'll do is it'll create a mini, I guess you could say, portal, where if we focus like infrared cameras, spectrum cameras, maybe even we have to keep the electronic stuff within 200 feet. But if we do that, we'll be able to. And the theory goes is that we'd be able to at least capture something in the electromagnetic cloud.
Yeah, I would just, if it's possible, make sure there's some kind of containment field around that, so whatever does come through cannot get beyond that point.
So what would you suggest we do?
Well, for example, I always say to use the ultraviolet or color violet as a protection energy, so that anything that does come through would be contained within that violet field. And, of course, everyone in that room should be using the color violet as a protection energy. Okay,
so we'd have to do something like that. And then, of course, we're going to have it at least, we're hoping, 100 to 200 feet away. So that, and then we're going to put it's going to be like electromagnetic psychometry. We're going to bring in artifacts that are associated with, I guess, something, a very powerful event. Of course, the John Wayne Gacy suits are going to be very important, but everybody else is bringing something else.
Yeah, well, that should be quite fascinating to see what pops through that.
Yes, it should. Well, and I'm glad I have you on to talk about this too, because, I didn't even think that, I was thinking so focused on vampires, I didn't even think that I could ask you, because you have experimented with stuff like this when you were at Montauk.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, in our recent conference that we did last weekend, we mentally created wormholes and vortices as individuals and groups without using equipment. So that was kind of fascinating as well.
You do that with thought forms?
Oh, yes, we have done that, yes.
So if we focused while we're together at the bar, or if we focused, then maybe we could also, with the electromagnetic energy, create perhaps an even more, I guess you could say, not harsh, but a more forceful opening, if we were to think it, right, or create it.
Yeah, you could, and what you can also do is direct or call in what you want to see or hear.
Really?
So in other words, you create the energy or the thought form, a pattern that will fill in with the person, place, or thing that you want to see there.
Now, what if, and this is the chance we're taking, what if, since the suits belong to Gacy comes through, can we control him and keep, he's a nice guy, except he's not nice when it comes to children. That's the personality. He had a double personality. So if Gacy came in, would we be able to control him if his spirit came through?
Well, yes, you can. Of course, if you just contain him in a violet energy field, he will not be able to get out of that. And my suspicion is that is what exactly will happen. He will be attracted to his own energy in the physical reality and be attracted to that. However, a person like that is most likely in a containment field anyway in the astral level, so that he may be prohibited from coming through because of the actions he committed in life.
Fantastic. Stewart Swerdlow's, gosh, I could talk about this with you all night. We could talk about it a little more. Stewart Swerdlow, my guest tonight on Ground Zero. Fantastic information just in the last 8 minutes. We're going to have more from him tonight, talking about the vampire attacks that have been happening lately, and a few other things, too. If you have any questions, 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. Stewart Swerdlow tonight on Ground Zero. We'll be back.
Press Secretary Gibbs, does a vampire work for the president?
It never ceases to amaze that in times of amazing human suffering, somebody says something that could be so utterly stupid.
It's like a horror movie where you're scared but you just can't look away.
Vampires are people, just the same as us. They're an ethnic minority. They are similar to us in so many ways.
Deputies say when they arrested Mr. Whiteman, he told them from the back of the squad car that he could not only smell their blood, but that he wanted to suck their blood. He also threatened to kill a deputy and his family.
At that time, the games were over.
A 21-year-old Whiteman believed deputies were afraid of him because he could live forever and that he was more than 100 years old.
How does one become a vampire? Did someone turn you into a vampire? Were you born this way?
I was born what you consider awakened, or being able to view the world for what it was.
He got inside and grabbed her. He was hissing at her and growling at her, and did attempt to bite her on the back of the neck. He then grabbed her and started to drag her out of the apartment, and that was determined that's when she was able to make her escape.
I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. The numbers to call tonight, 503-417-9595. 1-877-733-1011. Stewart Swerdlow is my guest. It began with animal torture and teenagers drinking the blood of their kill and the blood of each other. Then there was the plot to ritualistic kill one of the girl's parents and then marking the body with an occult symbol. This was an initiate rite of passage for a vampire clan in Florida. Rod Farrell, who was the ringleader of the cult, was mentally disturbed and was convinced that he was a real vampire, was constantly taking part in blood-drinking rituals. These activities happened 15 years ago, and Farrell has since been condemned to death in the Florida electric chair. Farrell pleaded guilty to killing Richard Wendorf and Naomi Ruth Queen on November 25, 1996, when he and 3 members of his blood-sucking cult came to Florida from Kentucky to help the couple's daughter run away. During the court hearing, it was found that Farrell's mother, Sandra Gibson, was responsible for introducing her son to vampirism. It was found that she would program him and tell him that he was a vampire, with blood rituals and all sorts of other eerie and creepy things. Tonight we talk with Stewart Swerdlow about mind control and how it begins. That case was one of the creepiest cases, the vampire clan in Florida. We've had a few other cases recently. Tell me a little bit about how mind control can start and how this can be programmed into someone.
Well, it is a very intricate science, and in fact, it has to do with breaking the mind pattern and the personality into fragments or pieces, or what we call compartments, which then can be reprogrammed or as a subpersonality or partial personality under the umbrella of the entire persona. This is usually done with physical, emotional, and mental torture, where the person is brought to a condition where they can no longer tolerate their physical existence, and then the mind fractures in order to deal with the situation, and there's an actual dissociation from the body and the personality during the severe part of the torture. And that's when the personality fractures. This was experimented upon by the Germans in World War II in the concentration camps. Of course, it is actually an ancient science that goes way back to, if you are open to it, the times of Atlantis and even before that. There were even Persian cults called the Ashashin that would program people to become assassins, telling them they were the living dead and had to go back to Earth in order to fulfill the will of their angelic masters. So there's a very ancient science behind it. It can be used with chemicals, drugs, in order to induce a state of mind that allows the person to believe something other than what they are. The government uses microwave and electromagnetic frequency scalar waves in order to piggyback the brain waves and embed upon the sine waves of the brain other thoughts that you feel are your own, even though they are not, because they're mimicking your own brain pattern. And those thoughts give you ideas or a self-identity that may not necessarily be part of your total persona.
So, a lot of the time, if you're under this heavy influence of mind control, many of the victims of mind control are unaware that they're committing these acts, whether they be murder or even crime for hire.
That's correct, and all of the time when you read these stories in the newspaper recently about these terrible crimes that are people killing their families, their wives, their children, murdering, raping, and the neighbors say, well, they're the nicest guy, never would have imagined. The guy this week that shot those women in the beauty parlor in Seal Beach, California, everyone said, oh, what a wonderful guy he was, the nicest person you never know. And then here he turns into this creature that is completely anathema to the personality.
Exactly, and last night we were talking about werewolves, and werewolves are not necessarily furry creatures. It is the essence of the spirit of the werewolf, the spirit of the beast, the spirit of the vampire, or the belief that has been programmed into them that they are vampires. And as I was reading the story about the vampire clan in Florida, the mother was responsible for programming the child into believing he was a vampire. They said that he had the personality of a 3-year-old, and that he was like a child wanting to get his way. And then when they interviewed him, he said, he says, I know that I'm a vampire. My mother told me I was born into vampirism, and that now I'm Satan himself, and I will be dying for my crimes. And he was perfectly calm when he said it. He didn't even feel remorse or anything. He just says, I'm a vampire. I've been born to be a vampire, and that's the way I am.
Yeah, they become desensitized to their actions. But in that particular case that you just mentioned, that had more to do with brainwashing by the parent at that early stage in life, and I would pretty much guarantee that the mother herself had been programmed more significantly by perhaps government.
What's really interesting about the whole thing is I've been noticing that a lot of these vampire cases, Stewart, the vampire cases get reported. There's one in Texas, but most of them are in Florida.
Yeah. And there's a lot going on in Florida and Texas, by the way.
Yeah, and I remember I received contact from Casey Anthony's future father-in-law. and he is a minister in a church called Solomon's Porch. And what they do is they investigate paranormal, I guess you say paranormal kind of evil activity or evil programming, and they try to rescue people out of that. Mm-hmm. And I had written 2 stories about Casey Anthony and the possibility that her baby was taken by some sort of a satanic group or some sort of a group, and that Casey was programmed. And I had mentioned that her lawyer had said in his press conference, he said something about how a ritual abuse case or a ritual death case, satanic ritual abuse, he mentioned in the farewell speech before she left, even though the case had nothing to do with it. I remember getting a letter saying, you may be onto something because there are a lot of weird vampire satanic groups in Lakeland, Florida. And he mentioned Lakeland. He says Lakeland, Florida seems to be is a hotbed for this type of activity, that there are groups that come and go through Florida and they kidnap people and they sacrifice people, satanic sacrifices. And I was like thinking, wait a minute. I don't know if that, because the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s, many people say was unfounded. I just had somebody on my show 2 nights ago that said in Astoria, when she was growing up, she says that they were subjected to ritualistic type of activities where teachers would show up in robes, and they pulled no bones about the idea that they were doing these rituals. And one of the rituals included taking a sheep and biting its testicles off right in front of the children.
Yeah. These rituals, these ancient rituals, go back to biblical times and even before. And look at the Catholic Church. When they do their transubstantiation, when they give you the wafer and say this is the body of Christ, or they drink the wine and say this is the blood of Christ. Isn't that vampirism a symbolic part of it? Isn't it?
I was going to put that in my article that I wrote, but I avoided that. But it's true. I mean, They wonder. You see these religious groups right now. In fact, that's what alarmed me, is that there was actually a meeting in Poland where a number of priests and exorcists had met and said that they were that the occult, I guess you could say, influences on children are all over the place. And they were saying they cited the show True Blood, and they cited the Twilight series, saying that this is why we're hearing about all of these attacks, these vampire attacks. We had about, I go this year alone, we had, I think, 6 or 7. And usually it's rare to hear this, but now it seems to be, the one guy in Texas saying that he was a 500-year-old vampire and he attacked this woman, the girl in Florida, that, I'll get into these cases more. A girl in Florida who attacked a man in a wheelchair, saying that she was a vampire. And then, of course, there's another Florida girl that says that she's both a werewolf and a vampire, which I just think that, it just gets to a point where you can go and you can find this story, and it seems to be turning up more and more in more frequency. And coming up, Stewart and I will discuss just why this is happening and what we're seeing in the news, and answering your questions about mind control and how this is happening and this ritualistic abuse is going on. Vampirism. It's the story that seems to be simmering below all the big stories right now. A lot of cases, and we'll tell you about the cases that have happened. Also, if you go to groundzeromedia.org, you can check out the video that we have available online, groundzeromedia.org, that I show you some of the suspects, and also the article called Pulling the Vampire Trigger that's up on my website now. You can look at some of the pictures that are on that site as well. We'll be back. Keep it here on Ground Zero.
Lewis and Ground Zero Radio on FM News 101 KXL. Zero with Clyde Lewis.
Tonight, Stewart Swerdlow is with us. We're talking about mind control, vampirism, and how we've had an increase in attacks of people who claim to be vampires. Many of them attacking, biting, chewing, eating flesh, and drinking blood. It's a new phenomenon, actually. We didn't have too many of that. I mean, we had the Vampire Clan of 1996. It seems like all this is increasing. With the mind control we've been talking about, Stewart, do you know who Colonel Aquino is? Michael Aquino?
In San Francisco, yes.
Tell me about Michael Aquino and his position with the military and what he did with mind control exercises.
Well, he was part of a much larger program that really spanned not just the United States but internationally, where they were trying to create a cadre of people what we would call sleepers, who could be placed in various strategic locations around the world and then activated into a particular function to create an event that could be then broadcast on the news media so that the government could then put, and I quote, reaction to it, kind of like what we're seeing happening now with the Iran possible assassination of the Saudi Arabian ambassador to the U.S., which was a fake story. Mm-hmm. So he was involved in all that in the beginning, but in order to create a person like that, they go into a sexual magic ritual, which is a form of programming where the person then becomes opened energetically through orgasmic means, and when you are at that state in the body, the mind is opened and information and instructions can be put in and taken out. And that's why we have all of these stories going on now in the books and movies about vampirism and sexual activity with vampires, because there's an association, or at least they want to imprint the association with sexual activity and blood ritual.
There was actually, and I have it on my website, if you go to groundzeromedia.org and you go into the pulling the vampire trigger, in the article I had placed a picture. It was from Rolling Stone magazine, and it was called The Joy of Vampire Sex. And it actually shows the cast of True Blood on the cover. They're naked and they're covered in blood. And I'm thinking to myself that that just comes right out and demonstrates what exactly you're talking about. I mean, Aquino, Colonel Michael Aquino, was actually a Satanist. He was a member of not the Church of Satan. He was a member of the Temple of Set, which is a theistic Satanist group. Am I correct?
Yes, and that goes, of course, back to ancient Egyptian religion, which goes back to Atlantean ritual, and that, believe it or not, goes back to off-world programming, which is where it all began.
And the vampires, of course, were there in Babylonia, the Babylonian vampires, the ancient rituals of the Assyrians, all going, that's how old the vampire legends are, and they were all programmed to go in and just kill, rape, murder, and drink the blood of their enemies. In fact, they felt that if they drank the blood of their enemies and ate the flesh of their enemies, that they became powerful. They took on their persona.
Yeah, and it goes back to the Lemurian culture, which generated Sumeria and the Mayans and Aztecs and Inca and all the groups that did these blood rituals where they would eat the beating hearts of their enemies or sacrifices in order to attain their energy.
I didn't know that. They ate their hearts?
Yeah, in fact, the Aztecs had rituals where they would take their prisoner or their sacrifice up to the top of the pyramid platform while they were alive and rip their chest open while the person was alive and rip out their beating heart, and they would use that, the blood and the energy in order to get power.
Isn't it interesting that that same ritual today, and we were talking about the wafer and the wine, or the bread and the wine, that it is the representation of the body and blood of Christ, meaning you eat the body and blood of a Savior or a God, you too become the body of God, which means that it's the same idea, but it's a form of, I guess, vampiric ritual where you retain the power and get a load of this, everlasting life or eternal life, which is similar to what we learn in vampire stories.
Correct. So really, what's the difference between Christianity and Satanism?
It's close, right?
Very.
I know that for a fact, because I know a guy, a good friend of mine, actually. I've known him for a long time, Rex Church, who was the head of Portland's group of the Church of Satan. I'm not a Satanist, but I knew him, and he would tell me all these things. I go, well, that's kind of similar to Christianity. He says, well, there's a fine line. He says, angels and demons are both cut of the same cloth. They just work for different masters.
Well, that's what it says in the Bible, the fall from grace. The were angels who became demonic entities. They're the same genre or level of being.
So vampires are walking incarnations of Satan. They are the lowest level.
Yes, and it really goes back to the non-physical, because you've heard people talk about energetic vampires, people that just suck the energy from you.
Yes.
In order to, and so if you manifest that physically, the biggest part of your body's energy, or the physical part, is the blood. That's where all your energy is located, and that is the part of where the ritual uses it to gain the energy. Just like an energetic vampire would suck your energy from your auric field, well, if it becomes physical, it becomes your blood.
Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight on Ground Zero. Some fascinating stuff we're talking about tonight about vampires. In fact, there's been an increase of reports of people who attack and then claim, while they're in the presence of the police, that they are vampires. They say, I'm a vampire, I'm a werewolf, or I have the spirit of the vampire in me. Where do they get these thoughts? In the case of Rod Farrell, he said, and his mother even claimed, that she was the one who programmed him into becoming a vampire. 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. The reality of vampirism now. I'm back with more. Keep it here. Don't go away. We'll be back. Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. Tonight, the numbers to call, 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. Stewart Swerdlow is my guest
tonight. Most news.
He's my guest tonight on Ground Zero. Very happy to have him on tonight. Today we're talking about vampires. We're talking about the programming of vampires. Because it seems there's a program that's out there that's snuck in under the radar, and a lot of reports that vampire attacks are happening. And it 1, 2 maybe, but we've had about 6 so far this year. It seems that more and more cases are finding their way into the headlines, and it doesn't seem to be letting up. I mean, with real vampire attacks, there's this bloodlust imagery in the media with stories about Lady Gaga allegedly bathing in human blood, and a recent Rolling Stone cover featuring the stars of True Blood sitting there naked saying vampire sex is great. In fact, I'm looking at the cover right now on my website at groundzeromedia.org. It says, True Blood. They're hot, they're sexy, they're undead. It goes from fun to being... It's kind of and I'm no prude, but I think it's a disgusting cover. I mean, they're all naked and they're bloody. I don't know, Stuart, if you've seen it, but... It's on my website.
No, I haven't seen it at all. But, Clyde, I wanted to just give a bottom line to some of this, and that is when the Illuminati have their ritual, what they want to do is invoke lower astral entities, and in order to entice the entities to enter into a body or to animate a body, they use either sexual magic ritual or sacrifice ritual. This is part of the Illuminati / reptilian religion. Mm-hmm. And they want to imprint this or embed this in the mind patterns of the population so that when the New World religion is imposed, that will be part of it and will be accepted. And the way they have the population accepted is by putting these stories in the media, by having Interview with a Vampire and the Vampire movie series, and having all these shows on television and romanticizing this vampiric lifestyle.
I find it interesting that all the time I was growing up, vampire movies were frightening and they scared me. Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, all these vampire movies, and even there were a lot of other ones that came out that were very frightening too. Bram Stoker's Dracula was frightening and everything. But then we got into the idea that vampires were misunderstood, that they were romantic, they were sexy, and then it went into Twilight with the idea that vampires can be chaste and they can preach morality. And it just seems to me that I wouldn't trust a vampire. It's like the frog and the scorpion. The frog makes friends with the scorpion stings him, and the frog says, I'm about to die. Why did you do this to me? He says, you knew all along I was a scorpion. That's what I do. I'm a vampire. I kill. I bite. I mesmerize. I abuse.
No, that's exactly correct. And throughout history, there have been stories of vampires. Maybe the most famous one, Vlad the Impaler, or Count Dracula in Transylvania, who really did drink blood, and, in my opinion, was a shape-shifting reptilian who kidnapped local villagers as well as invading Ottoman soldiers, hung them up from trees in his property, drained their blood, and had the blood drip onto his breakfast, and it would eat out in the open with the food and the blood right on it. So these are things which are in our history. They are in the books for children, and now they are on the media every single day.
It's frightening because it takes 500 years to take the sting out of a vampire and make him romantic. I'd hate to see what they do with Hitler in 500 years.
Well, isn't he coming back up, too, lately? I mean, almost every other day there's a story about the Nazis or Hitler or something to do with the Third or Fourth Reich, actually.
Exactly. Let's go down to Brahim. Brahim, hi, you're on Ground Zero.
Yeah, hi there. I want to say something about Catholics for a second here. I was going to talk about that. I want to say something, but the thing about all this vampire stuff, this stuff is really real. What people do is when they play around with this stuff, they unknowingly open up portals to the evil side, and this is not fake stuff, and it's going to turn things upside down, and they're doing it in the musical world, as you mentioned, and it's very, very dangerous.
Raheem, did you hear about Lady Gaga? They said that Scotland Yard had to investigate her because she was bathing in human blood.
Yeah, you see, this just gets our kids entrenched in this stuff, and they don't even know what they're doing, and then they're just bathed in evil stuff, which is just beyond belief. Why parents even allow this? If you listen to Z100 any length of time at all, you'll pick up all this stuff. It's awful. So now about the Catholic stuff, you mentioned that, but I'm Catholic and I go to Mass every day. You really, I know you're not trying to say they're the same as this, but you kind of made it look like it was. And there's
no, Brahim, let me explain something. It's the sacrament for any religion is taken from Mithrian legend, the idea that if you eat the flesh and blood of a god, you will become a god. That is why the transubstantiation exists, is because the idea of taking the Holy Sacrament makes you part of the body of God.
No, it does, but you're not becoming. No, you're not going.
No, you do.
Separate.
You do.
No,
you do.
Well, I'm Catholic, and I'll tell you, you don't become God.
Why do you take? No, you become a part of the body of Christ. You become a part of the body of God. You become God You become a part of God's family by eating His flesh and blood.
Okay, but let me change but that you can agree though that what we do in church is much different than what these people are doing on the other side.
Well, I'm not saying that what you do in church is the same as what they do. I'm saying that there's a fine line. They do it different. The Mass, the Black Mass, is a complete, utter perversion of the Mass itself.
Exactly.
And so that what Stewart was trying to explain is there is a fine line. There's a fine line. The rituals are similar, but they have certain things that are perverted, which make them
much different consequences, obviously.
Exactly. I mean, some people even read the Lord's Prayer backwards.
Of course they
some
do.
People,
now, all this stuff is very, very real, and people need to know that.
I think, Brahim, I think we agree on a lot of things that you're talking about. I just want to make it clear that I was not saying that this was a satanic ritual within church. What I'm saying is that it is an ancient ritual that, when perverted, can be attributed to vampirism.
Okay, now you're saying it a little more clear.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, and I hope it didn't get lost. So there you go.
Lots of prayers are needed in all of this. So.
Oh, you're exactly right, Brahim. You're very right. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the call. I think what it is, Stuart, I think people get a little uncomfortable when they find out that a lot of the ancient rituals, that are carried over in religions, some of them have some very dark pasts. Some of them have, it's like when I tell people that Santa Claus wasn't always a good guy. They tend to go, what? What are you talking about? Santa Claus was actually a horned devil, by the name of Krampus. And, he was Molech. He was the idea of the sacrificing the child to Molech.
Well, all you have to do is take the N in Santa and put it at the end, and you got Satan.
That's true. And the whole Saturnalian, cults, and the idea of sacrificing and blood sacrifice and eating flesh and blood. One of my theories, Stewart, and I know a lot of people, tend to go, oh, they want to turn it off. But one of my theories is the biggest secret of all that they don't want to reveal to us. The biggest secret of all is that everything that we did when we were ancients, when we were primitive, everything we did was, in my opinion, encompassed in the idea of vampirism. We ate each other, we drank each other's blood, we did all that, and then the way we changed was we were told, this is not something you do. This is something you don't need to do. That's why Jesus had to die on a cross, was because he was the ultimate sacrifice. He did it so that we didn't have to do it anymore.
Yes, Clyde, but and I don't mean to offend any of the religious people listening to your show, but, religion is a major form of mind control, and it doesn't matter what religion.
I think we can agree on that. I agree on that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and as far as Catholicism is concerned, the Christianity we have today is not the original Christianity. What we have today is a Roman pagan version of it, where they took these pagan rituals and accommodated the Roman population by mixing it with Christianity and created Catholicism.
Yeah, they had to mix them all together. That's why we have certain symbolism and all that. Right. And see, that's the thing, is that vampirism, the vampirism that we see in the movies, the vampirism that we experience and everything else, we need to understand that everything that we do, and Stuart, you would agree with me, everything that we do is all based in our bloodline. It has everything to do of what kind of blood stock we are. And,
that's right.
And that's why it's so bizarre that, while people don't believe in vampires, they need to. Raheem was right. They need to believe in vampires because they focus on the bloodline. It's all, and I've told people that is what the 666 is. It's not a mark that you get on your hand or in your forehead. It's the blood that they take from your finger in your hand. It is the blood number. It is the number of the beast, our beastly blood that needs to be purified in the spirit. And that is where you say, I will not accept being a beast. But many people are deciding they want to be, and that's why I think we're seeing this vampirism happening in the country all over the world.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And, the 666 is really the molecular structure of the carbon atom in our blood. Our blood is carbon-based. And so that is actually what the 666 is all about.
You are so right.
Yeah,
6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons.
Yeah.
Stuart, you're wonderful. Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight on Ground Zero. Love the man. He's right on the money, and I've been reading about this for a long time. It's about the blood. 666 protons, neutrons, electrons within the blood, the carbon-based human form. That is why when people who talk about sustainability, they talk about your carbon footprint. What that is that your 666 will determine what you can buy, sell, or trade. Your carbon footprint, your blood impression, and the eugenics directives that are there to wipe you out. The vampire plucking and harvesting of the human form. Vampires are real. 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. We'll be back with more. Keep it here on Ground Zero.
Got an opinion? Call KXL now. 503-417-9KXL or 877-733-1011. This is Ground Zero on FM News 101 KXL. Everyone is in on the secrets, and big things are being planned. Call Clyde Lewis now. Ground Zero.
Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight on Ground Zero. The numbers to call, 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. Tonight, the reality of vampires, and we seem to be pegging it. We seem to be getting down to the nitty-gritty, which is really amazing, about the secrets of bloodlines, the secrets of vampirism in the entire world, the infiltration of vampirism, and the idea of ritualism and ritualist sex that goes on. The satanic aspects of this are just overwhelming, and we see it all the time in the news right now.
That's correct. and we're going to see more and more of it as time goes on. You know, just a few years ago on BBC television, on New Year's Eve, I believe it was in 2005 or 6, they had a Chinese Christian eating a dead baby on television, and he said he was eating the baby for Christ.
Really?
Yes.
See, that's the perversion that we're seeing, I was actually talking with Cliff High about this, saying that there would be a declaration of war that the church would do against Satan because of all of this scary stuff that's been happening, and it's all and people. You know, you're not going to believe it because you've been programmed into thinking that it's something that they're going to introduce, that you're going to have a choice. No, you've already been marked. It's up to you to not live up to your mark. And they're already plotting eugenics directives against you. And they are vampiric in nature. They do with your blood, your bloodline, and it's all about where you are and what your bloodline is. Otherwise, they wouldn't care about the bloodlines of the royalty. They wouldn't care the bloodlines of the presidency. They wouldn't care about any of that. Genealogy, you name it, they don't care. They wouldn't care about it if they didn't care about where your bloodline comes from.
That's exactly correct. And you know, Clyde, it's been coming out recently that in the Vatican itself there are satanic cults. And priests are even starting to write books about it and come out into the media and say that there are these rituals that are going on inside the Vatican and other areas of the church.
They were just saying the other day that there's mysticism in the Nazarene churches. The Nazarene churches are worried because now they're bringing certain mystical things that are pagan and strange, and they're saying, why are you doing this? Why are you bringing this into the churches? People worry about people like Mitt Romney and others because they're afraid that Mormonism is going to bring masonry and religion together into the government. It's already there.
Yes, I was going to say, it's too late.
Yeah, it's already there. So whatever Mitt Romney has or whatever Huntsman has, it's no big deal. They're all, you know, I see those Baptist ministers all getting all worked up, and they're saying, vote for Rick Perry. He's a better Christian than Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's not a Christian. Hey, you know, if these guys are going to go jump around, and I don't know that Mitt Romney does this, but I do know that the others do. If they're going to go and pray to an owl in the Bohemian Grove and sacrifice a child or a mock child to the great god Molech, I don't think they're doing anything that's very Christian.
Correct. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And, you know, my opinion is there are no politicians running for high office that are worth that office.
Right. You're exactly right. Their morality is not the same as ours. That's for sure.
Correct.
Let's go to Kent. Kent calling in tonight from Salem. Hi, you're on Ground Zero.
Hey, Clyde. How's it going?
Good.
So, just doing some research lately, me and my group have been doing, we've discovered that here in the Northwest there's actually two known vampire covens.
Okay.
One is in Portland and one is in Eugene.
Okay. Do they have a name?
We don't, but I know the one in Portland's on 82nd and Burnside.
Okay.
We've actually tracked to the club that they go to. The funny thing about that is in about the last 2 to 3 months since what you're talking about, they have completely disappeared off the map. We've been doing a lot of tracking, and everything is disappearing. Like they know something.
Well, when you say vampires, are you talking about goth kids that get together and basically listen to Bauhaus, or are you talking about real vampires?
As far as we can tell, they're the real deal.
Okay.
We have a couple of partners down in California, and they've got a couple down there too, but it's weird how they disappeared.
So you say
we haven't been able to locate where they moved to or anything. They just kind of vanished one day.
Okay, but you're still looking after them and tracking them.
Yeah, we're trying to find them because we want to find out why they're here.
Okay, well, that's
they
amazing.
They came out of nowhere.
They usually do. They're very covert.
So, you know, we just want to. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to go in there and sit down and have a nice meal with them, but just to get behind and figure out what's going on, why they're disappearing and reappearing in certain areas.
Interesting. Well, Kent, good luck to you. I just would say I wouldn't go in with a preconceived notion. I'd go in with an open mind if you're going to talk with any of them.
Well, yeah, definitely. I just wanted to see if you had any input on what you think it might be the reason why they're disappearing.
I wouldn't know. I mean, I didn't know there was even a vampire cult here in Portland.
Yeah, like I said, there's one in Eugene and one in Portland, so.
Okay. Well, maybe somebody out there who's listening to my show tonight will call in and maybe they'll say that they're part of that vampire cult.
All right, then.
All right, Ken, thanks for the call.
Thanks, Clyde.
You bet, bye-bye. Numbers to call, 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. Stewart Swerdlow, my guest tonight. We're very glad to have him on. He's opening our eyes and our minds to new things. What do you think about what we're talking about? Would you like to add your opinion? 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. We'll be back.
More with Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero Radio on FM News 101 KXL.
Sunday night when she put her SUV in reverse and into a canal. She told first responders she put the car in reverse because a vampire was chasing her.
911, what's your emergency? Can you tell me what's happening? What animal bit him? Can you go over there and help him? Possible 217, I need all available units. What happened? No, please stay on the line. You can't help him now. I'm not letting him go. I'll have to take him. I can hear the other person in the room. Is he alive? Is the animal still in the house? Listen to me. I bit him. I'm a vampire. Ma'am. I have to go. It's all right outside. Ma'am. I'm so sorry. Ma'am.
Who are you? I am the devil. I am the devil. And I am here to do the devil's work.
I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. Numbers to call tonight, 503-417-9595. Or 1-877-733-1011. Tonight, Stewart Swerdlow is my guest. Tonight we're talking about vampires, we're talking about the bloodlines, we're talking about it all. Vampirism is very real. It's one of the things that is the secret. It is the hidden secret of everything. That in the beginning, there were vampires, we were monsters, we were beasts, we were like the animals, and we had to learn not to be that way. And that is why when we start hearing in the news about kids, now these aren't goth kids, because goth kids are harmless, and in some respects, the subculture is very fetishistic of vampires. But people like, for example, Stephanie Pistley, who was in Panama City right now, she admitted to killing a kid. 4 other people were with her. Police say that she lured the guy by the name of Jacob Hendershot into a house. They beat him to death, dumped his body in a storm drain, and then she says that she claims that the boy tried to rape her, but then she said that she had her beastly sense kick in. She is a vampire werewolf hybrid. She didn't drink his blood, however, she says she has been drinking or has drunk the blood of her fiancé. It's amazing stuff. Stewart, what do you think of that? Where does this come from?
Well, that story particularly has to do with programming and ritual sacrifice. That girl, that group have altars within them that believe that they are vampires. There's a vampire altar within them. And when they're triggered and that altar comes forward and takes possession of the body, there's a whole set of functions that kick in, and they believe that they are vampires and need to drink blood.
Can anyone have a vampire altar within them? Is that our base, our core, that deep down we all are capable of becoming blood drinkers and beasts?
Within the human being, there's the possibility of everything. And when programmers create the matrix, and the matrix is a cube that's 13 by 13 by 13, and if you do the math, it comes out to 2,197 possible compartments or sub-personalities, and within that 2,197, yes, there could be one or two or a group or an alter group of vampires, werewolves, or what have you in there, depending on the genetics of that person, the incarnations that they've had, the bloodline that they are, and what can take hold as far as the programming is concerned.
Okay. Let's go now to Michael. Michael, hi, you're on Ground Zero.
This is Michael.
How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm just fascinated by the program this evening, and the first question that comes to mind based on listening to you since you started is there a group of overlords, I was going to say, that has been programming humanity for however long? Maybe a question that Stewart could respond to.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Michael, I wrote about it in my book, Blue Blood, which is the Illuminati, which can trace their ancestry to Sumeria. Yes, these are the people who are controlling the resources of the planet and have a reptilian-based religion and believe in programming as a manner so that their culture can go through history unchanged without deviation. So programming to them is actually part of their religious belief system.
When you say reptilian-based, who or what are we referring to?
Well, we're referring to that hybrid group that originated in Sumeria, and it's a very long story, but they were programmed by reptilians who genetically mixed the DNA with human beings and created mankind. And we are basically both mammalian and reptilian. This particular group has a very high percentage of the reptilian DNA, and in fact, their sole personalities are reptilian, not mammalian. And so they have a very different outlook on culture and religion and what the future should hold. They believe that society should be robot-like slaves that follow instructions and do what they're told without questioning. And basically, that's the society that they have started to create here right now.
Always remember, in every vampire legend you ever hear about, is that the vampire itself has the ability to manipulate and also has the ability to hypnotize and mesmerize, which I find fascinating.
And this would be something that vampires have learned from the reptilians?
Well, what do snakes do? Well,
Well, you have to understand, vampires can actually be a natural part of the totality of existence, in nature. We have natural vampires, vampire bats, mosquitoes, leeches, sharks, creatures that crave and need blood. And so this is nothing new on the planet. And so they have simply used this function in nature for their own purposes, because blood, as we've mentioned, is a power source, a control source, and if you manipulate that, you can control the planet.
Fascinating.
Michael, thank you for calling.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Could it be that the iron-rich blood, the idea that iron or the feral nature of blood is what causes the power? Because there is that theory out there that everything on this planet is magnetic in nature. So the idea of iron-rich or feral-rich blood, the iron-rich core of the earth, all being somehow manipulated or at least held captive by the sun. That's why vampires are like going in the sun, because the sun pulls on the earth, the moon pulls on the earth, pulls on the iron that's there, the iron core, and we have iron flowing through our veins with blood.
Well, I'm of the opinion there is no iron core in the Earth. I do believe in the hollow Earth theory.
Mm-hmm.
But the point of it being that we are carbon-based and they are not carbon-based. Reptilians have more copper in their blood, which is when it oxidizes turns blue-green, which is where the term blue blood comes from. And so they have actually more resistance to disease. They do have more energy than carbon-based creatures, and they do consider themselves to be superior for that reason.
Well, they're in some reasons, some people say superhuman because of the fact they've been able to adapt, and also they've been able to grow, and they're able to do things that we can't do. We're limited, and they have things that they can do because they're not from here. That's another idea.
Well, none of us are really from here. Human life was created here. It wasn't natural. Our genetics are not from this world. This world is actually hostile and alien to us, which is why it's so difficult to survive on this planet. It's not a natural habitat for humanity, for human beings.
Interesting thought. Let's go to Janice now. Janice calling in from Michigan. Hi, Janice. You're on Ground Zero.
Hi. I've got a three-pronged question for Stewart. This actually has to do with that 911 kind of call that you used right before we started talking again after the break.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, when those things are played, that actually is emitting frequency. It's coming through. We're actually tapping into the horror and the frequency of that. I mean, I could feel my energy just going, wow. My question is that actually serving us when that happens? And I know that's always been a traditional way that we do our media, is to have those kinds of dramatic wows, But I'm wondering if that really serves us, that connects into us. And I've noticed that within the television set, if I've got email as part of my telephone, and that email's on CNN, and I'm getting phone calls, I feel like it's streaming. And then, so it's that question. And then are narcissists, which I've noticed there's more of an increasing part of that, are they the vampires? And then my third part is, what do we do about it to protect ourselves? My ultimate protection isn't quite, I don't feel like it's strong enough, but what do I eat?
Okay, let's first of all, let's let Stewart answer the question about the narcissism and everything else, and I'll answer the question about the phone call, the 911 call I played. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm hoping I got the question correct. But as far as narcissism is concerned, that is what the media, that is what the Illuminati are embedding or imprinting in the population, because narcissism implies not caring about other people, only about yourself. And that's basically what they want, because when you then become more of a self-contained individual, you're easier to control, there's less connections to others, so you can be easily manipulated. And we're also seeing that in our society with relationships, because relationships really are being strained and tested and pushed to the limits, and more people are not maintaining relationships, whether it's with spouses or with business, etc. So we're finding our population becoming more isolated, more contained, and therefore more easily controlled. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question as far as that category is concerned.
I think you are. I mean, part of my own personal experience is that the more that I started to do this kind of inner work, the more I started to connect more vertically to, and have that own independent thought, breaking away from the Catholic Church, which I already knew what that was all about. But my spouse, who I'd known since I was 15, and he knew that Catholic Church was a cult. I mean, we kind of always knew that. But then within the last couple of years, I felt almost like a pulling at him from his family, and then ultimately he's broken away, and there was a woman that came into the relationship, and now she's involved. She goes to Catholic church and teaches Sunday school, and then boom, now he's married to her. It's like it happened so quickly, and I was devastated. So is that, and he hates me, and I just feel like he's very narcissistic.
Well, that's really the general theme out there now in relationships. There's really no commitment. There's no loyalty anymore, and that translates also to national groups and religions. They don't want people to be committed to anything. They want you to be individual, so that you can be swept up into this new world order, this global order, so that there's no nationalism, no self-identity. Everything is pretty much separated.
I would like to answer the question regarding what I played. This show is, we not only inform, but we entertain. And if it did create a feeling in you, it got your attention. That's what I do. That's what my show does. And it's part to enhance the experience of the program.
No, but I wanted the larger picture.
What's
overall. The programming that's out there actually is then connecting those energy streams, and now I actually have the experience of that.
Right.
Now it's in my field. Unless I do the proper things to make sure I don't merge with it, I pull it out, I'm clear. But what do we do? Because I notice it's escalating, and I notice sometimes it's hard. That stuff connects.
Well, it's like eating. It's like eating the right kinds of food. I mean, if you expose yourself to certain things that exhaust you, that bring you down, let me tell you this. I work on this show all the time. I'm working on it every hour almost. I get up. The first thing I do, I eat, drink, and sleep ground zero. I have to. I have to read. I have to. That's why my show is unique. That's why the ideas that I express on this program are different. That's why I bring people on, like Stewart on the show, is because I want people with different ideas to break the paradigms that we're stuck with. The ideas of how certain things are. I've studied the occult most of my life. I've done it for a while, and a lot of things, what I say, a lot of people say, well, I don't believe what you're saying. Well, you haven't read what I'm talking about. But what I do is, when I get the opportunity, I break away either to lose myself in a stupid TV show that's funny or weird, or go for a walk and enjoy the leaves and the trees and the beauty that's in my neighborhood. I mean, going to Washington Square and viewing here in Portland and viewing the beautiful trees, and they're changing and everything, curling up with a cup of coffee and realizing that, I'm blessed and that I'm happy with what I do, and I find the world a fascinating place, nothing to fear, but a lot to learn about, a lot to understand. That's what I think is important. So if you find yourself in that mode where you need to clear yourself or clean yourself, the best way to do it is to find your oneness with God. Find your oneness with what makes you happy, your spirituality. Mm-hmm. Does that help?
Caller, what part of Michigan are you in?
Southeast Lower Michigan, in the Westland Canton area, about 45 minutes east of Ann Arbor.
Because, I'm in the western part of Michigan, and you should pop over and attend some of our events sometimes.
Definitely.
All right. Well, Janice, thank you for calling from Michigan tonight. Take care.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You had Stewart Swerdlow, my guest, tonight on Ground Zero. If you have a comment, please call in 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. Yes, I know the opinions here are controversial. That's why you're there. That's why you pick up the phone and call. And if you have an objection to what I'm talking about, I invite you to call in and talk about this with me. Few people have called in and said, Clyde's crazy, but they don't stay on the line. How can I address that? Give me a call. We'll be back. Keep it here on Ground Zero.
Got an opinion? Call KXL now. 503-417-9KXL or 877-733-1011. Or with Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero Radio on FM News 101 KXL. Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis.
My guest tonight is Stewart Swerdlow. We're talking about vampires tonight. Of course, all aspects of vampires, something you don't learn in the movies. A lot of people are saying, the vampire stories this isn't the type of vampire story I ever heard about. That's because vampire stories have basically been distorted and misinterpreted throughout the years. In fact, there are many people that don't know that vampires are just like werewolves in a sense that they are shapeshifters. They can take on forms. They can take on forms as pigs, rats, dogs. They can take on the form of, wolves. And it's all the same. The idea of a force that can incarnate itself and then shift into different forms. Am I right, Stewart?
That's absolutely correct, because they do come from the lower astral, and they do prefer to possess human beings because then they have greater access to the culture.
That's right, and I was talking with Brad Steiger, and it's often the idea that you invite the spirit to come to you, whether you know it or not. You invite them either A, by over drinking or doing too many drugs and finding your body weak. That always happens when someone ends up becoming the victim of a walk-in scenario where a spirit or a disincarnate spirit enters in when a person's drugged or when a person is drunk. It happens. You also see the same type of situation go down sometimes when people are vulnerable, sick. They can also find this. It's just the way it happens. It's a part of life, and people try to poo-poo it and they say, well, it's all mental illness, it's all this. Yeah, that's a part of it, but there's more to it than that. It's programming. It's going against one's programming. It's freaking out and becoming less of a human being and more of a monster, more of a beast. Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight on Ground Zero. If you have any questions or comments, if you disagree, or if you have anything you want to add to it, we'd like to hear your opinion on this too. This is a discussion, and we'd like you to be a part of it. 503-417-9595. That's 9KXL. Or 1-877-733-1011. And with that 1-877 number, you can call from anywhere in the United States at 1-877-733-1011. So people who are in chat, people who are listening online tonight, and I know we got a lot of people out there listening online, you can call in, like Joyce did from Michigan. We'd like to hear from you. Once again, 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. We'll be back with more Stewart Swerdlow on Ground Zero. And this is Ground Zero. Ground Zero coming to you live from FM News 101 KXL in Portland, Oregon. And tonight we're talking about vampires, the real thing, not something you see in the movies. The movies and the stories are based on the real idea. The real idea is far more terrifying than you realize, because they don't just lurk with capes, and they're not pretty boys, and they're not Team Edward. They don't sparkle. They're in high places. They're in your leadership positions. They are in churches. They have infiltrated. In fact, that's the biggest worry right now the churches have. Is somehow some influence has gotten into the churches and is changing the way people worship. And tonight, Stewart Swerdlow is on the show, and we've been talking about some of these cases of, I guess you say vampirism. People saying that they're vampires. People claiming they do attacks, like, for example, Lyle Bensley of Galveston, Texas. He's awaiting a psychiatric evaluation now in jail because during a burglary, he attacked a woman and attempted to bite her neck, claiming that he was a 500-year-old vampire. And when the police arrived, he was growling and hissing in a parking lot and wearing only boxer shorts. He said that he needed to feed. He hadn't fed in a long time. And you just look around you and you see a guy by the name of Robert Maley of Phoenix, Arizona. He was a homeless man, and he needed a place to stay. So he decided that he wanted to move into a house in Arizona, Aaron Homer and Amanda Williamson. And they said, okay, Mr. Maley, you can stay with us on one condition. We want to suck your blood. And he would offer it. Then one day he says, look, I don't want to be on the menu anymore. And what happened? Homer decided that he would go in and stab the guy and feed. You know, you don't go into a house of... What was the condition here? Oh, okay, I'll give you shelter if you let me suck your blood. And this is the type of thing that's going on. This isn't being made up. These are stories that were in the news in the last year. In fact, this summer, as a matter of fact, a lot of them. Stewart, is this all programming? Could we look at the influences of the TV shows like True Blood and Twilight? I mean, is this influencing people the wrong way, or is this something a lot deeper?
Well, it is deeper, and what these programs are doing are triggering the people out there that have vampire alters within them. And so when they read those books, watch those shows, hear those news stories, it triggers those alters to come forward, and then they begin their function.
You know, many of these people seem to be outsiders, too. They seem to be like It's usually homeless people or people that don't have much money or anything else, and they're the ones that tend to become the vampires. It's kind of bizarre.
Well, quite honestly, the economic status of the person is not the main factor. The real thing is the genetics, the lineage, etc., the mind pattern that the person has that can be triggered, and as I say, it's all leading up to the imposition of the New World religion, which will incorporate sexual magic ritual and sexual sacrifice ritual.
Would you be kind of, intimating that we do have a religious group that's going to be formed that may be headed up by an incarnate devil or an incarnate king?
Well, they're going to have a staged second coming, and that being will proclaim a holy empire on the earth, and yes, he will impose this New World religion, which will incorporate these rituals, werewolf, shape-shifting. That's why we have movies like Harry Potter that emphasize the astral schooling that goes on. All of these things are imprinting the population and allowing them little by little to accept what's about to be imposed on them.
It's very interesting you brought up Harry Potter, because some of the words that they use in Harry Potter are all religious pagan, such as, he was at King's Cross Station, that he's the half-blood prince, which is a Merovingian term about the Cross of Lorraine, where they have the blood of Christ and the blood of Satan flowing through the veins of this prince. And that's where I also come up with my idea, and I did the presentation at ConspiracyCon about the Antichrist being of the royal family, coming from the royal family.
Yes, and I always have been a proponent of the twins. In the church of the Chateau, in the front of the church, there is the Christ baby and his twin on the other side of the altar.
Right.
And who is this, quote, evil twin, unquote? Is that the devil incarnate? That was the brother of Jesus.
Yeah, that's the question, because there always seems to be like this story of the darker one, or the darker son, or the one who brings balance. You see it in Star Wars, you see it in all kinds of literature, and of course there's also the Arthurian legends that the king will return, and he'll become the king of the world and bring balance to the entire world, and he will be the new Christ, which is correct. An amazing, amazing thing. If you read this stuff, this is what the elite believe, that there is a leader, a vampiric leader of sorts, who will shed blood for peace, and he will lead his kingdom into a reign of a protected peace only for certain people who are of the bloodline that fit. Everyone else will be destroyed, and they will eliminate a third or two-thirds of the population in the process.
And of course, we also have the twinning of the sun, the second sun, that will be coming into our solar system in the next few years. Yeah, and
a lot of people are saying they're seeing things near the sun now, and the twinning of the sun is happening. They talk about Betelgeuse possibly going supernova, causing a twinning of the sun. It's all part of this blueprint that they have, and it's all part of this vampiric bloodline blueprint. And when people, I had somebody that tried to call in, and they said I was insane when I was referring to the blood being the 666. That's exactly what it is, because it's all about the worship of the bloodline and the lineage. That's why you see in movies like Star Wars, Darth Vader had more midichlorians, or Anakin Skywalker had more midichlorians in his system. His name was Anakin, like Anunnaki. It's the same story they're trying to tell us through literature, and unless you read and study up on it, you don't know what they're trying to tell you. It's all hidden code.
Absolutely correct.
Let's go down to Jacob. Hi, Jacob. You're on Ground Zero, calling from Tigard.
Hey, first time caller, recent listener. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up my wife's ex-boyfriend. He's into vampirism.
Okay.
He's a pretty intelligent person. He drinks blood symbolically. He doesn't drink actual human blood.
What do you mean symbolically? What does he use in place of blood?
It's I think wine.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
Sure.
And the odd thing, I was listening as I was waiting on hold. You talked about them being in places like churches and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, he used to be in the Navy, and he was a chaplain. And as I've hung out with him and other people and like his friends, they actually are into blood, and they purchase it at like on a black market, and it fetches some pretty high prices rather than just going to like a clinic or something to get it out. I guess.
Yeah, there are blood harvesters that are black market blood harvesters that give blood to people for rituals, and there's also I'm sorry to say baby marketing as well, and that happens through Southeast Asia and Mexico.
And here.
Well, I don't know where here, but I do know that the trafficking of human bodies and the traffic of human blood has been going on for some time. It's what they don't want to talk about, but it's definitely something out there that needs to be considered, and it's because there are people out there that do these types of rituals.
Right, and, I just wanted to bring it up because, a lot of people are marginalized by, like, say, some of your more controversial topics and stuff, and, like, some of these people that are, like, homeless and, like, having these situations or whatever, they might have, like, psychological issues or whatever. But, I'm a pretty rational person, and, I saw this happen. I was listening to your show. My buddy told me about it, and so I thought I'd call in because it was a topic that I personally witnessed, and, it's happening here. So.
Okay, well, Jacob, thank you for being a witness and telling us about it, and thank you so much for being a listener to this program.
All right, you have a great evening.
You too. Take care. And that frees up a line at 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. You see, there are some people, Stewart, that have witnessed it or have been around it. And I was telling this story today when I was in Buenos Aires. I used to live in a place that was near Buenos Aires. Actually, it was a trip, but it was Luján, which was the area called the Capital de la Fe, or the capital of the faith. And what was really odd about living near a basilica where people gather, even the Pope would go there, was that there were all kinds of different people, both righteous and not so righteous. And I remember there was a day where a man came to the basilica, and he stood there. And I remember we left town, and we came back, and he was still standing there. I went and I had dinner, walked back into town to have ice cream. He was still standing there. And by the time it was dusk, his eyes were bleeding as he was standing there looking at the church. And I thought that was there were things that I saw that I have seen in the front of that basilica that it would just make your toes curl, because there have been stories of like people who've been possessed. In fact, there was a story where John Paul II met somebody at the Vatican that was possessed, and he couldn't cast the demon out of her.
Well, that is absolutely correct, and Latin America does have its stories about vampirism. Of course, chupacabra comes from the Latin American cultures. The goat sucker, or the ones that take the blood from the animals, and that's also found its way to the United States.
Right.
So there actually are creatures that do that.
Mm-hmm. And now they're talking about. I was reading today as I was looking up the vampire legends and the vampire stories. There are now stories coming out of Mexico that rival the chupacabra, and they talk about genetically modified vampires. That apparently there are people saying in Mexico that there are people that somehow have become genetically modified, and they have they were talking about a very strong jaw that can open wide. And some of the people there have been buried after they die. They bury them in the ground, and they shove a rock in their mouth to keep them from turning into vampires. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. They say they're genetically modified vampires. They say they're genetically modified humans that they have come in contact with. This is a legend now that's coming out. I was just reading about it today. I don't know if anybody's ever talked about it. It's up there with the chupacabra. But there are these people, they say, they're genetically modified that have a jaw that can bite down harder, and that and then if they die or if anything happens to them, they always shove a rock in their mouth to keep them from attacking.
Well, that's very interesting. To me, those are reptilian shapeshifters who perhaps when they shift into human form, they're not completely into the human form. They maintain some of their reptilian characteristics. And in the northern part of Mexico, in the Zona de Silencio, in the northern desert, it is known that these beings exist under the ground there in caverns and tunnels.
Really?
Yes, and in fact, British spelunkers in northern Mexico a couple of years ago entered into a cavern, and there they found footprints in an underground stream that led out into deep parts of the earth, and they had 3 toes on them.
Oh, wow.
And obviously were bipedal, and so they got out of there very quickly. Same thing is happening in Africa. There are many reports now in Africa of vampiric beings who attack villagers, take their blood. The witch doctors are getting involved in the whole thing. And what they're actually going after there in Africa are the albino children, the ones who look white but they have black features.
I was reading about that. Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight. 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. We'll be back with more. Don't go away. Keep it here on Ground Zero.
This is not a test. It is the future. Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis.
Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight on Ground Zero. We're talking about vampires, the reality of such. We've had a few reports in the news about vampires, about people who claim to be vampires and are sitting in jails right now getting psychiatric help. And a lot of worry from the present clergy saying that the occult and supernatural fascination may be declared a fad in the United States, and psychologists are pointing the finger at the new surge in occult themes, TV shows, and all sorts of things. There was also an attack in New Zealand where 3 men were accused of tearing open an unconscious man's veins with their teeth and drinking his blood. The victim allegedly had made a move on one of the vampire's wives, which kindled his anger and apparently is hungry. The man was also asked why he did it, and he claimed that he answered to a king vampire that would appear to him in dreams. That's an interesting story in and of itself. It said that he was having dreams of some sort of, incubus or something that would come to him in a dream and tell him to suck the blood of human beings.
There was also a very famous story about 3 or 4 years ago in Germany, if you recall, where a man put an ad in the newspaper looking for someone he could eat.
Yeah.
And he actually had someone that applied and came over, and he videotaped him murdering this man, dismembering him, and eating him.
See, and this is the thing. This is so out of the ordinary, and it's so bizarre. When we talk about delusions, delusion's one thing. But the idea of even saying, and in fact, I think the guy came willingly, the guy that was eaten.
Yeah.
He said, I felt it an honor to be eaten by this man, or to have my body, dismembered and eaten. And I'm thinking to myself, it's almost like he was summoned, or he was programmed to say, okay, I'm going to just let you eat me. I'm going to let you, devour me. It's something that I want. And it's like, what kind of world is this? And people say, there are no vampires. There are no vampires. It's all a figment of your imagination. No, it's the bloodlust of this world that we're coming into, and there needs to be a change in the way we look at things, and we need to defend ourselves from these types of beings. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, we have to change the mind pattern of victimization that is pervading humanity. We need to change that and take our power back so that these things can no longer happen.
Yeah, I really agree that what right now we seem to have allowed for the people who are, call themselves the people who rule over us. You hear about the 1% and the 99%. That 1%, there's even within that 1% a group that doesn't even know what's going on, and they're enslaved, and they're used as chess pieces, and they're moved around as pawns, and we're seeing people being moved around, and whatever you do, even if it's a protest or anything like that, you tend to be manipulated, and things change, and they're hijacked, and it turns into a complete and total mess.
I agree, and we have to look at what is behind all of these movements on the earth, all these so-called revolutions and sit-ins and protests, because it's not really coming from the people. There are those behind them who are motivating them to do this in order to make certain changes and impose certain laws and regulations.
And then other people will follow as well. Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight on Ground Zero. If you want to call in and be a part of the show, 503-417-9595. Or 1-877-733-1011. We're back with more. Keep it here on Ground Zero.
Where is my mind? Where is my mind? Captain Stardust at your rabbit skin to rabbit baby again. Mind that you profess to know so much about the differentiation between cosmic darkness and the powers of the mind. Superstition. Not jealousy.
I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. The numbers to call tonight, 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. Tonight on Ground Zero, it's Stewart Swerdlow, and we're talking about vampires, the reality of vampires. It's funny because we were talking earlier about how the Assyrians, the Greeks, Europeans, everywhere, we were told throughout history that there were vampires, that they exist. And now vampires have been turned into something that they don't want you to fear anymore. And the programming is there to accept them into your home, to invite them in. And that's what I find very frightening. And I remember looking at it saying, 500 years from Vlad the Impaler till now, and we now accept the idea of killing, assassinating American citizens. We believe in lawlessness. We believe in all the things that vampires stand for. Wouldn't you say, Stuart?
Yes, and if you look at why, what is the symbolism of that vampiric lifestyle? It means giving yourself up, giving your blood, your life away to someone else who will sustain their life by taking yours. And that is really what the New World Order is about. Giving yourself up, not having your self-identity or your integrity anymore, but being vulnerable, victimized and abused, and accepting that.
You know, it's funny because I always bring up, we've heard of things like global warming, and we've heard of global, all this stuff, and how, we need to reduce our carbon footprint and reduce what we do on this planet and everything. What they don't tell you is when they're saying reducing your carbon footprint and reducing what you do, what they're really meaning is if you kill yourself, you'll do a lot better for the planet than if we allow you to be here. Because it's all about global sustainability. It's not about whether or not, it's warm, cold, or whatever. It's the idea of who's going to survive. It's all about survival. And those in power are the ones that are saying, hey, if we can get, John Q. Idiot out there, John Q. Sheep, to off himself or lay himself down for us and fight our wars for us and bleed for us, then we've won. We won. We've used the vampiric tactics on him, and people fall for it. And you bring up a topic like vampirism, which we are tonight, and people will say, well, I don't know, that sounds kind of odd, but you know what? The metaphor is real, the attitude is real, the bloodletting is real. I mean, they're getting ready now. We're planning on going into Iran because something happened, some assassination attempt, and they did it as a distraction because they don't want people to understand that their president committed murder. They don't want people to know that. I mean, how do they figure? I mean, they're doing it all like the vampires would do it.
Exactly correct. And, people believe everything they're hearing on the news, just like they believe the 911 story and the Hussein hanging, and they believe the Osama kidnapping and dumping him in his body in the water.
Oh, that Muslim burial. Remember the Muslim burial they gave him? Yes. The good old Muslim burial, right. Which is BS because, no, they don't bury at sea. They have to bury them with their head facing Mecca, and that never happened.
Right, but people just believe it, you see. And so, here's another story. Let's talk about vampires and werewolves and warlocks and astral entities, and now all of a sudden people are starting to accept that.
Well, they are accepting it, but a lot of people still are having a hard time believing that there are, what do they say, our fight is not against powers and principalities, but spiritually wicked in high places. And it's true. There are spiritually wicked people in high places, and they have no morals, and they don't care about you, and they just as soon watch you starve to death. They regulate your pain. They go, that's the idea. It's the idea that they can regulate pain, they can make you have pain, or they can take away the pain, they can give you the drugs for the pain, or they can take the drugs away. They monitor you to make sure that you're not getting enough stuff for your pain. They take away everything that matters to you that will take away pain, like money, for example. What about the idea that money is energy, and that they suck that energy out of you? And it's true, because money is a unit of it's a unit of energy. You use a dollar bill to fuel a car, or you use a dollar bill to get food in your stomach. You use a dollar bill to get warmth in your house. You use all those things. They are units of energy. And when the banks and when the people in power are sucking that energy from you, that's vampirism.
Absolutely correct.
I don't think people understand that. They don't understand it.
People are so worried today just about daily survival that they're not looking at all these details and symbolisms.
Yeah, I mean, they're lost in the symbolism, they're lost in the idea, and that's the whole thing, is that when the Knights Templar did what they did, they went in and they took all the money away, and they shut down all the banks, and then they made off with all the treasure. That's what's happening now. We're seeing the same thing happening now, where they're making off with the treasure, and people are standing there going, what do we do now? You starve. That's what you do now. And if you're starving, you tend to become a beast. You want to kill for food, or you may eat something you wouldn't normally eat, like a dog or an animal or even another person. That's what they want. It's like, remember that line in Batman, The Dark Knight, where the Joker said, he said something to the effect, he says, you get people all riled up and they'll eat each other. You watch. And we're watching it now.
Yeah, and like in the book The Lord of the Flies, when one of the lines in there that says, I've seen the enemy, and the enemy is us.
Yeah, exactly. And people are, I think people aren't realizing that this is happening. I'm wondering if anybody can see just how wrong things are. I've heard so many people applaud the actions of, what we do in this country. And if everything we're doing in this country is righteous and correct, then we would be seeing, I think we'd be seeing some fruit from our labor. We'd be seeing good fruits. We'd be seeing good yields, good harvests, good this, good that. We're not seeing that. And it's always been throughout history that whenever a land starts losing, whenever a land starts not yielding the crops, when people are sick, when people are poor, when people are dying, what eventually happens is there is a ritual where they eliminate the king. They eliminate the king and they start over. And I'm thinking that, and that's a vampiric ritual, by the way, because what they do is they put the king in a place where everybody can see him, and then in the public square they kill him. And it's a bloodletting ritual, and they do it in a vampiric way. They did it with Mussolini, and they did it with Hitler. They did it with. It's throughout history. They find a public place to display these guys and say, this is what we don't want, and they hang or flog or do something to them, and that is a vampiric type of ritual.
That's correct. And and I do believe in my mind that ultimately human beings will realize what's going on and they'll do something about it.
I don't know what they're going to do about it. I mean, they're not doing anything now, really. I mean, I just wonder, we tend to think that we're under this, I guess you could say, this trance, this strange trance that we believe that one party will destroy the mistakes of the other party. And that's what happened with the Bushes. When Bush was in, everybody thought, well, the idea would be, let's put a Democrat in there and it will eliminate the Republican mess. It's not about Republican or Democrat. People go in there, they go into places of power, and all they do is destroy. Because they know that they're going to be able to get away with it. They know that if they obfuscate and try to sabotage something, that they get a reward for doing it.
Well, they all work for the same people. It doesn't matter what political parties they are. It doesn't matter what religion they are. Ultimately, they have their puppet being pulled by the same string.
Right. And that's I think that the metaphor, I hope, is not lost on people. I hope they understand that, what we see in the news with people, saying they're vampires, what we see, I mean, we can always write it off and say it's because of TV shows like True Blood or Team Edward or Interview with a Vampire or any of those shows, we can always say that, yes, it makes us accept the vampirism. We look at it, we accept it, we become, I guess, we become sterilized against it or sterilized to it. But the truth is that what we're doing is we are mimicking and we are acting out what our parents or the elite that govern us are doing. If the president can get away with lawlessness, if the mayor can get away with lawlessness, if any official can get away with lawlessness, other people feel they can too. They feel that the laws don't apply to them, so they go and they do things like kill, they murder, they maim, they abuse children. I mean, you heard about that story today about the priest that is going to be indicted because he knew of another priest that had kiddie porn on his computer. I mean, these things, we look away and we don't enforce morality, and this is where we're going to be hurting, and this is the vampiric nature that I think we're trying to illustrate tonight, that this is the symptom of the disease. The disease is well being thought out and well being planned. It's going to be released like a plague. In fact, vampires represent plague, am I right?
That's correct. Absolutely, and we need to look, every one of us in our lives, and say, where are we giving away our energy? Where are we giving away our blood, both physically and metaphorically? And how can we stop that and take control of ourselves again? And that's what I try to do, Clyde, in my work, is to teach people to get rid of the mind patterns that create these things and to replace them with mind patterns that are beneficial and helpful to yourself and others.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people in the chat room tonight I'm watching, and there are a lot of trolls in there tonight that are laughing at the conversation, saying, I hope the vampires don't scare you, ha ha ha, because they look at it as a fictional character. They look at it as something that's not real. And the truth is that they probably haven't met one, or they've never been in the presence of anyone that has sucked their life force away from them, or has sucked their money dry from them. The dynamic, the cult dynamic, or the destructive dynamic that exists either in relationships or in marriages or in business associations or even with your government is alive and well. We've been taught well with the neurolinguistic programming. We've been taught well with the mesmerizing words. We have been convinced that we're victims. We have been convinced that we need to do something about it and become bloodthirsty just like the ones that attacked us. It's like the idea of vampires bite you, and then the whole thing, as we know, you turn into one. So let's use this as a metaphor for terrorism. The terrorists bite you, and then what do you have to do? We have to turn into terrorists ourselves in order to feel good about ourselves, and we go out, we murder, we kill, we destroy, we take over lands, and we do the same thing. So let's use terrorists as vampires. They moved in, they bit us, and now we have the choice either to turn or we can go and make peace with ourselves and realize that we have been bitten, that we are turning into vampires ourselves.
And from a spiritual point of view, you become what you hate and what you fear. And the reason that happens is because it's the only way that you start to understand what it's about, because now it's within you.
Right.
And so what we need to do, again, release, get rid of all of these mind patterns inside of us that are allowing these things to be projected out and reflected back to us. And all those people out there who mock the conversation, who make fun of the topics, these are people who are in fear. They're afraid of the information, so their only way they know how to deal with it is to make fun of it.
Or they block it, and they deny that it's there. We're not saying that we're supposed to let it envelop our lives, but my gosh, we should be aware and not be in denial about it. And, if we can find ourselves in our homes, keeping our houses in order, keeping the love in our families, keeping families together, what little of our families we have, or what little time we have of our families, making sure that we're prepared, making sure that we have money set aside, making sure that we're making good decisions with financial, health, and other situations, we can ward off the vampires and use it as a metaphor, ward off those things that are going to destroy us. They're going to destroy us from within, because that is the alien threat that we need to be aware of. That is the thing that's infiltrating and trying to destroy us.
I agree with you 100%.
Stewart Swerdlow is my guest tonight on Ground Zero. 503-417-9595 or 1-877-733-1011. Tonight, the discussion is about vampires, whether you believe in the metaphor or whether you believe or not believe. We know that there's a force out there that's taking our money away, taking our spirituality away, is giving us pain, hunger, and it's saddening us. The panic attacks we're feeling and the stuff that was going on inside of us, the gut feelings and the way the heart feels, people are taking drugs to get rid of them. Maybe we should pay attention to them and understand that there is something wrong and it needs to be changed. Put a stake through the heart of what's bothering us. We'll be back.
You're listening to Ground Zero on FM News 101 KXL. This is not a test. It is the future. Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis.
I know that probably what we're talking about tonight challenges your thoughts. Always challenges the way you're used to being brought up. Maybe you feel it doesn't affect you, but it will. It will affect you because you'll be able to see, for real, vampires in action. And they're in action all the time. You see them in Washington. You see them not giving people what they need. Or you see them say, hey, it's not my problem that you don't have food. It's not my problem that you don't have this. No, it's not your problem, no. But to stand there and to take pleasure in the problems of others, take pleasure or not even addressing those issues. I think that's how it creeps in, don't you think, Stewart?
I agree. I think that we, though, are allowing them to do that, and we're not taking our power back, and that's what I would encourage everyone out there to do, is to be who and what you are, open up that God mind within you, let that out, project that out, and then these victimizers cannot affect you anymore.
Yeah, I try to point out that, not everything that we do in this country or that our government does in this country is correct. Not necessarily fair either, but a lot of people are thinking, well, questioning is wrong. Well, government is not my country. Government is not something that we should all worship. It's not something we have an apotheosis for. And ever since Obama, ever since we've had the arrival of the Messiah, people tend to think that this is what you do. You just fall over and let them do what they wish. I just wish people would go back to, somebody was telling me a story that back in the day there was a protest in Portland, and the media turned on the police and said that the police attacked the peacekeepers. They said that. Now it's the other way around. Now the protesters are the villains, and the police are the ones that are by the media told that they're doing the right thing. And it just goes to show you that now that the media protects the empire and doesn't call out the empire and say, hey, look, you bloodthirsty dogs, why don't you do something for us instead of constantly ruining our lives?
That's right. There is no more free media. There is no free speech anymore. If anyone makes a comment about the government, immediately the next day they have to apologize for it. Otherwise, they're victimized by the news services.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Stewart, thank you for being on the program tonight. I think tonight we gave a new perspective to the vampire, and I think that it's not just some Team Edward, or it's not some beautiful person with long hair looking great. I think it has a lot to do with manipulation and abuse.
I agree with you, and I hope that everyone learned something tonight and will do something about it. Fantastic.
Stuart, thank you so much for being on the program. I'm sure we're going to have you on again.
Thank you very much, Clyde. It's always a pleasure.
Take care and have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.